Welcome to the Vision Maker podcast. Today, we have the chance to speak with Assistant Director and Director Nick Sasi Romano. So, pleasure to have you on with us today. And
Hello.
Hey, Nick, could you please introduce yourself to the audience, give them a little background about yourself, and yeah.
Sure, absolutely. What's up, everybody? I'm Nick. As stated, I'm an assistant director. I'm based mostly in New York, born and raised. And yeah, I've been working in a professional capacity in some way in the film industry for the past 6 to 7 years. I've dotted around a bunch of different departments through that time, but I've now landed on being an AD the last couple of years, and it's been a lot of fun. I work on a variety of different projects like music videos, commercials, and some short films and narrative features when the time arises. And yeah, we just try to have as much fun as we can doing it.
Oh, awesome, man. Yeah, had a chance to dig into you a little bit, and I saw that, you know, you've had a lot of fun projects, especially the last 2 years or so. I
Yeah,
think
just about.
I think I saw you mention something like 70 projects in 2022, right?
Yeah, just about 70 in 2022, and actually this year I've just hit 70 now.
Wow,
So there's going to be
got a whole
probably
nother quarter or
my
so to
my
go.
guess is about 85, 90 by the end of the year. Yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Oh
it's
man.
cool.
But hey, that's kind of like the life we're trying to do here, right?
As much as we can, yeah. Try to stay busy.
Yeah. And would you say for a vast majority of those projects you were ADing for them?
Yeah, at some point in some level of the AD team. Usually I'm the first, but I don't obviously turn down any time being second, or even key PA. That's been a lot more rare this year.
Nice.
But in previous years,
Of course, as
I
you're
sub
building
in
up.
whenever. 100%.
Yeah. No, awesome. Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. AD, that's an interesting one around the film world because I see a lot of like, in a lot of ways, you guys really keep those big sets together. Like, you guys are really like the glue for the DP, for the director, and like the whole team as far as keeping things together. But you're also like, um, very consistently, um, the meme, there's always the stereotype with the AD
Of
coming
course.
around, things to get right on time, different things like that. As far as your experience as an AD, how do you feel like your interactions with people? Because I hear a gambit when it comes to like ADs, where it's like either everyone's stressed and kind of frustrated with the AD all the time, like is this just like orders, orders, or, but I've also heard there's some people is like, no, actually, there's some of them can be pretty cool too. So it's like, how do you feel like you feel your dynamic with your teams across all these different production sets? Because I've seen you work with some major brands, some major artists, and also some
Yeah.
more local.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the thing to start with is obviously just the stereotype of you know, what an assistant director is. Pulling out even farther than that is like most people outside the film industry have no idea what an assistant director does. Me explaining to my family what I do like on a daily basis is like an impossible task. Because I basically have to reduce my job to like a certain level of like, oh, this is what I do in 3 steps, but in fact it's a lot. And yeah, the big stereotype of ADs is that they're loud, boisterous, they're constantly yelling at someone's, always stressing everybody else out. Um, and I fully understand that read, and I've know people who work like that, and that is totally their style. And if they get the job done, they get the job done, right? And if someone wants to hire them for that, that's cool. But my style is a little bit more casual, but not in terms of easing the time tension. It's more of just we could treat everybody with respect. It's not hard to treat everybody with respect. Everybody is usually here to do a good job and like, make something cool. And that's the thing. Like, I try not to attach myself to projects that I just don't think will make something cool in the end. So
Mm.
every single time I'm coming into something like, okay, if we get one really cool shot even out of this, it's worth it. So let's make sure we get to the fun stuff, right? And obviously, with being an AD, you're not only the person keeping time on set, but you're also really paying attention to safety, and you're kind of the liaison for the production crew and everybody else, right? It's you're trying to be this middleman in the middle of also talking to the director and everybody else to try to figure out, like, okay, what's the best thing that we need right now? And you can make 800 plans. I've made pages long schedules, and 2 hours it's thrown out the window because something happened that you're never going to predict, and then you just got to kind of run with it. So the job is essentially being a giant problem solver, and I think that's why liked it and why I fell into it, because I've always been a fan of like puzzles and problem solving and logic and stuff, and so that fit very well with my personality. And so coming into this job, it was like, oh, I can do that. I can help solve people's problems and help get us to the finish line, and that's kind of where I've landed on that.
I actually I love one thing you said in there is that the whole realization of being a basically a master problem solver, because I feel like with logistics on most things, I come from prior to like really doing what I do with the production company stuff, I come from an events background.
Mm.
And the one thing I know about any live production, any live event, it's not if something goes wrong, it's when something goes wrong, when that one thing stops working the way it should, when that whatever the timeline goes out the window pretty quickly,
Yeah.
usually someone's late, who knows? And you have to pivot on the spot. And from what I've learned too is that production sets are no different. Um, and that can really fluster some people, especially if there's something like fully like scheduled out, like you've made the Google Sheets, the Google Docs, everyone has their call sheets, everything like that. And then the director comes in and is like, hey, yeah, so that's the scene we're going to do today. I don't want to do at all. We're going to skip
Yep.
forward and go to do this scene. Or it's like, well, we actually, location comes in and says, like, there's something going on with the location. We're actually only have it one
Yeah.
day instead of 2 days. And, you know, like all these things. And you're finding out, like, as people are arriving, thinking one thing. And then a lot of it falls on you, right? As to like
100%.
pivot.
Yeah.
So how
It's
does that, how's your process in that when those things really monkey wrench?
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of different factors, and you gave a lot of examples before of what could go wrong, right? So, um, easiest one is always with music videos, especially like the artist or the talent shows up hours behind schedule. You said another one where the director is, we're shooting one scene, and I've had it happen before where we're halfway through shooting a scene, but we want to get another thing real quick, so we're gonna move the camera over here, and then he wants to come back, so but we gotta come back, and that's a ridiculous waste of time, but we have to do it because that's what the director wants. Um, all of these things I try to do as much as I can in prep, um, to put that in the schedule to try to figure out, like, okay, if the artist is someone who's going to come up late, maybe by, if the reputation is about like an hour or two or more, we try to put anything that the artist is definitely not in first, if as much as possible. Um, if the director has a reputation for moving around and being mobile, that's cool, and I'm totally willing to work with it. We just have to be as flexible with we can. So I'd be talking to art department and to G&E saying, how many of these sets can we actually get pre-lit completely? So that way we can be mobile and move around to set by set. So it's really just asking the right questions about, um, who and where is the best place to be, given all of the circumstances. The thing I tell all ADs that either I'm talking to or training or PAs who are asking me, it's mostly all about questions. Every single thing about being an AD is just having your rotary of questions and just asking as many of them rapid fire as you possibly can and get as many of the answers and retain the answers as much as possible. And every time you do a job, you're getting another question, whether you know it or not. You're getting another thing to add to your list. So, you know, it rains during a production. You've never had it rain during production before? Okay, cool. So now you have the list of, hey, are we prepared for rain with pop-up tents and umbrellas? Does the talent need to be shielded? Do they need do they need a duplicate set of clothes if it does rain on them? Like, all of these things happen just basically through experience, but you just get better and better as you learn those questions.
And I feel like honestly, that's just a plain important skill as any member of production. You need to um, constantly be aware of not if something goes wrong, when something's going wrong, how are you going to
Totally.
pivot? Because I feel like even at the higher levels, it's even more important then in the sense that like, can this guy like work under pressure? You know, pivot. Is he light on his feet, adaptable? You know, because sometimes the talent wants to do one thing. You know, this the director, DP. You know, and it's like, can you do that? And I'm as someone as like as an AD and at these high levels, you kind of have the pulse on all the departments, to say the least. Like because you're kind of in charge of making sure that everyone is where they need to be. Everyone is like working together in that sense. You're the middleman in a sense in a lot of
Yep.
ways. Um, yeah, with that. Now, but you've also worked on smaller productions. I
Totally.
know, you know, you got stuff with your band, and but you also got stuff like, so we recently had Anthony Natoli on here and James Morano, and I know you've worked on with their crew for Sunday, 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 and I know that was more of a skeleton crew for the
Yeah.
film. So, and other things like that, you know, and of course you have some of your own projects. So, how do you feel is the pros and cons or differences that you really see from a small, like grassroots production versus these bigger commercials that you've done for like New Balance, Nike, Spike, and all these guys?
Sure. Absolutely. Um, it's just about kind of like what is the expectation um of what you're trying to get out of it, because everything can be on a level playing field. And I'm sure Anthony and James probably talk a lot about this, about them being scrappy, them being kind of like freelance by themselves. And what we were doing with Sunday Sunday Sunday, for those of you who might not have seen those episodes, Sunday 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 is a movie all about drag racing shot on iPhone. We started shooting that in 2016. And I joined. I knew Anthony. We worked together a long time ago now, and he brought me in because he knew I was at the time studying film. I was in film school, um, and it was an interesting way to start my career, really, as in film production. It was the first feature I had really been on. Um, and because it was everybody was volunteer. Basically, everybody was there because they wanted to be there, not because they were expecting a paycheck or really anything out of it. They just wanted to help Anthony make this movie, including James. He came down just to make the movie. And it was a really cool environment just to start with filmmaking, because it was like, this is just people who just want to make a film, whether they want to like elevate and succeed in film at the end of the day, who knows? Um, and I feel like most starting filmmakers kind of live in a similar world where they just start making, they have their iPhone, or back in the day like an old camcorder, and they started filming things and try to make something with their friends, and then it grows into kind of more than a passion, or you start making money from it, or whatever the path is. There's obviously hundreds. um, but yeah, so the difference between something like that and the bigger productions is just kind of about scale and expectation, in my opinion. It's really like, we would show up on a day of Sunday 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 and say like, okay, what are we getting? And we just go for it. And we wouldn't have much prep, really. Like,
Yeah.
there's something I tried to ask Anthony to do, is like, especially in his continuing projects, just like, hey, what are we doing? Like, what, like, just talk to us about like kind of what we do. And obviously now as an AD, like, not having a schedule going into a day is like a crazy thought. Um, but you get a lot done because you can kind of just go for it. With bigger, up to union jobs, but even just like the bigger productions that I've worked on, um, you need a lot of time. You just need a lot of prep time to just kind of talk it through, because there are, you know, at minimum, like sometimes 40 to up to 80 to 100 people. And that's not even really ever including talent. Like, you're talking about organizing all of these people and making sure not only do they know what's happening, but they know what's happening in the moment to continually adapt, like you are, right? It's one thing for me to adapt to a thing that gets thrown by the wayside, but it's another thing for me to then update the 100 people that need to also know what's happening in the shoot. um, there are some levels of productions where you can just kind of point the camera, shoot something, and move around, and that's fun. And that's typically where I actually really, where I enjoy most, is when we can kind of be a little scrappy with it, little run and gun, because we can invent things and we can be a little bit more creative, and I can help suggest things and I can help make the things happen. but there is a level of structure and hierarchy when it comes to the bigger productions that you know you will get things to get, like you are getting the plan, and you will shoot what is written when you're on that level of production.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, I can only imagine. Like you said, like 100 plus people.
Yeah.
You have to.
I
It's like because then it's like that's not. I don't even think that's possible to organize a day of, very effectively at least.
Yeah, it can be challenging. The things I've been dealing with a lot recently, there was a production I was on semi recently. It was about a 50-person crew, and then there were 80 extras on top of that.
Hmm.
Um, so you're not only trying to tell the 50-person crew, like, hey, we need to be in this setup by this time, but then you're also saying, like, hey, 80 extras, I need you to perform this action in camera, and do it so that way we can get done by this with the scene by an hour from now, right?
Yeah,
It's just about keeping everybody unified, and the only way to really do that, I think, in my opinion, effectively, is to again treat everybody with respect,
of
and
course.
just kind of keep the positivity up. Like, hey, this is a difficult job, completely. Like, no matter what position you're in, it's difficult. So as long as we can stay positive about it and like, hey, we can get it. Let's just keep it focused though. We can't
Yeah,
deviate too much.
I like the key points I kind of got from that were, you know, obviously understand what the goal is for the day. You know, this is what we're trying to do. This is the goal. This is what we're trying to end up with by the end of the day. This is what we're all working towards. You know, and then, but also having clear, concise communication and just treating people like people. I mean, it's
Yeah,
always been the common thread. You want to just be a good energy, you know? People
totally.
respond well to that. People are more likely to listen to that. And of course, you're dealing with a million different personalities all at the same time, and a lot of
Yep.
this stuff is getting trickled down, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And
very much so.
so, of course, the clearer you can be, the more effective in communication you can be, the more things become streamlined, the less need to repeat, and less chance of things getting skewed in the direction that you don't need it to go in.
Totally. Yeah, I say, I mean, it's an obvious fact, but
Yeah,
the AD is kind of just like the manager on the set, right?
yeah,
Like any other manager position at any retail store or food service or anything like it's the same type of job
yeah,
where you're managing a bunch of people, you're making sure that the thing that you're all working to do is working
yeah,
and that you can get through the end of the day effectively and not have to close late or whatever. So it's a similar structure. Yeah, and it's just communication is everything. Just
yeah.
making sure that everybody knows what you're talking about. Um,
So to
yeah.
track back a little bit, you mentioned when you were talking about Sunday, 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 how it was kind of your start. It was your first feature, and it was kind of like where you really, I guess, boasted your industry. I wanted to ask, like, really, like, how was that? Like, how did you get started really in the industry? And secondly, like, how did you fall into becoming a first AD primarily?
Yeah. So through this goes back, but it is important. Through high school, I was in a um, a video club through the high school. It's kind of like the video news program that most high schools it seem to have. But we did a lot of like cool entertainment segments, and like
Nice.
we were always trying to do something new, like a little bit of sketch comedy, a little bit of news. I hosted the news, like the school news segment, but at the end of the day, I was the person also putting the whole thing together, and
Kind of like in
I got like
Spider-Man, where you see the little newscasts
yeah,
every
right.
time.
Yeah, essentially. So I did a lot of that through high school. So I was already. It wasn't like I just kind of hit the ground running just because I liked film. I had been editing basically full time, a 15-minute piece every 2 weeks. So I was in the kind of workflow cycle even just through doing regular schoolwork, and right in the interim period between high school and the beginning of college, I started picking up a couple of extra like editing gigs and editing jobs, and that was kind of how I got my break in just a little bit with people who were doing some film projects, and I was like, oh, this is cool. As I said, I met Anthony through one of my former jobs, and we started doing that stuff. But it didn't really go anywhere until after I really kind of left school. School for me was everything kind of. I went in kind of just wanting to be a director, and that's what a lot of people who do film, I think, want to be. I don't think anybody goes into school wanting to be a gaffer. I could be wrong about that, but most of the people that I went into school with wanted to be a director or they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a screenwriter,
Or
which is
DP.
totally cool. And I fully understand that. And so did I. I fell into that same category, right? But through some of the classes, I went to Brooklyn College, by the way, and through some of the classes that I took there, I started to realize like, oh, there's a lot of other things that you can actually do on set that was never explained to me. Um, and one of the classes was taught by this guy Tom Riley. He was a union first assistant director. He is, I guess, a union first assistant director. He worked on like 19 of Woody Allen's movies, and he did a bunch of other movies on top of that. And he had a class which I didn't know really. He might treat all of his classes like this, but the class I took from him was just called Current Cinema and Criticism, which sounds like it's just like you go to the movie theater, watch a movie, and you talk about it, but it wasn't that. It was he showed movies that he had worked on and then talked about how he scheduled them and like logistically planned them all out. And that was like an eye opener class for me because I was like, wait, this is a whole job. Like the AD as previously on through all my other short films that I'd done through school were really just like the person that just kept the day moving. Then taking this class was an eye opener, and reading his books and saying like, wow, okay, there's actually a lot to this. And I've always been kind of in the leadership role in a bunch of different situations. So I've said that sounds like a cool job. I want to kind of pine for that. Um, so like for a couple years I was just doing like right at the tail end of school I was doing just whatever I could to get on set. I did sound for a while. That was like my majority of my work to be on set. But I also did like I gaffed, I gripped, I did everything but camera basically. I got myself out there, and I got enough on enough sets with enough people that um, I got the word back that like, hey, I'm actually like I learned to be an AD. Like I trained under a couple people. Like I would love to give ADing a shot with your next production. Um, I took a couple free gigs, and I think that that's like taboo for some people that taking free gigs of just to do it, right? But I did it at the jump because I didn't really have any other option of how to like get to the position I wanted to. And it won't work for everybody, and I can't make that a blanket statement, but it did work for me because I did enough free gigs, and specifically for certain people I did free gigs enough where then people were like, oh, I just want to hire you because you did a good enough job that on ABC production that I'm going to hire you going forward. And then just from there was the network. Just the network grew. I met more and more and more and more and more and more and more people, and more people just started recognizing me as the AD or a person who can be trusted as an AD. And now we're at the point where just it's full time AD work. So really, to summarize, it was like I did a bunch of work in a bunch of other departments from editing and sound and all that stuff. Tried to find my footing on set, found what I wanted to do, and then kind of transitioned when I knew the moment was right or I wanted to get out of the departments I was already working in. Um, yeah, that's the start.
Well, no, that's great, and it sounds like in a big part, it's a ton of networking, of course.
Yeah.
A ton of, you know, putting your best foot forward, and yeah, like you said, the free gig type of thing. I know it's such a sensitive topic for some people, but it's honestly a reality for a lot of people in the beginning. You know,
Yeah.
I think people just get messed up that it's like you shouldn't just continue to do it. The goal is to get some footing down and then you work your way out of it. you know?
You can't get exploited by
Yeah.
it. I think that's the biggest thing is you can't let yourself just fall into the trap of like, oh, I'll get a job eventually that will
No.
actually give me,
Yeah.
pay me back. Because, it's cool and it's art for everything, but it also is my livelihood. I may,
Yeah.
my job is being an assistant director. So I have to weigh those
Of course.
costs now. Um, and I think the thing with the free gigs is like the the you have to know what your limit is.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to know you have to play the cards. If you think it's going to help you, if you're working with a client or a director or someone that you really are interested in, like yeah, it might be worth it. Um, but you have to be very careful, I
You
think.
really have to,
And
like
it
you said, weigh what you're getting out of it. Like
yeah,
it's like sometimes, yeah, sometimes the way to think about it, it's not free. It's more of a barter. Like, are you getting a
right.
portfolio piece out of it? Are you getting a chance to make a connection? Are you getting a chance to be like, oh, I've worked with so and so, you know, this or
Or would it
that,
be a
or
good
to
learning
prove yourself,
experience?
you know? Yeah. Or
Right,
you get a
exactly.
chance to learn, or do you get a chance to prove yourself to a person who otherwise you wouldn't get the time of day from, you know?
100%.
So no, I think that's smart. I think, and then it's just that's great to hear. I love how you described that, like, you know, that class itself almost sounded like a master class, honestly. Like, really to get learn from someone in the field and them go and break down their own work is definitely like a unique environment compared to the typical experience in a classroom where you have a teacher talking about everybody else's work and going through
Right.
the textbook. So those are, like, honestly my favorite type of teachers.
Mm.
I personally went to school for audio, and definitely my favorite teachers were the ones who were working professionally while they were also teaching, you know,
Yeah,
because they always brought that real world experience into the classroom. And I think those
totally.
teachers always make a big difference. Um, but yeah, no, and it's such a small world compared to some of the people we know. Um, One thing I also would love to hear a bit about, like, so I know you also have your own band. It's just
Hmm.
like indie rock style. I really dig it. And you've done some
Thank you.
music videos for it too as well. But
Yep.
I'm also a musician. I have my own
Mm.
band out here on Long Island, and I'm curious to hear, because I know for me, my musicianship, my view on music, I'm an audio engineer by background, so it's also funny how to hear that you did some sound yourself. And of course, usually I think feel like once you're trying to become a musician, you end up becoming somewhat an audio engineer.
Yeah.
Um, but how has that informed your work as an AD? Because I know how it's informed my work as a cinematographer, as a DP, as director, on how I view certain processes and editing and my creative aspect. Because I feel music its own language, so I feel like once you learn the language, it starts to come out through other things and inform other decisions and creative outlets, especially. So I'm curious to how your musicianship, how your music, and all that has also transcended into your line of work, or has it not at all?
Yeah, it has. It's in interesting ways though. It's not really how you think. Little plug, my band's name is Slumber. It's SLMBR. Um, and yeah, so I think the music side of my life has kind of become just the creative expression side because ADing is really less of a creative job compared to most jobs in film. The music has kind of been like the outlet for creative expression, and it's always been that for me. I've been writing music since I was like 14, 15. But the it's really now become like the number one for that. But in terms of helping me for ADing, it's actually just kind of given me almost like an in certain places, or just kind of talking about language to people. So there are things that I know because I've been playing on stages as a band for like 7 to 8 years that most I would assume most ADs won't know or most production might not know. Like just you shoot at at a stage venue, I'm gonna know certain things about what's there, what the back line is, like what I'm expecting to walk into when I show up at that venue. But even just talking to artists for music videos, like just having a conversation with them, just musician to musician. And I don't plug my band to like the top 10 artists that I work with, but just kind of being able to have a conversation about like, hey, do you actually like if they're doing a performance scene and they need some sort of playback option for themselves, like being able to have a conversation about that, like saying, yeah, I know you might want headphones for this, or this is too loud, or you need more on the left side, or
Mm-hmm.
like the speaker for some reason is only panning the left side and it's not panning the right side, so they can't hear the
Mm-hmm.
vocals. Like, well, the little stuff that I know just doing band and music, that stuff does come in handy, but it's like the little tidbits, like everything else that I do. It's like the little trivia that helps kind of bring my position to the next level.
I totally, I totally hear that because it just gives you that extra level of connection. Like you said, especially working with music videos, I feel like as any person in production working with an artist, the second you can kind of communicate in their language, they also just immediately like relax a little
Yeah.
more. Because I think because sometimes because they all they know is that, so they're trying to talk to you in your language and they're struggling. But when you can meet them on their level, they're also like, oh, oh, and
Yeah.
it definitely helps make things flow easier and better because then they feel more comfortable telling you as they would say it. And and then of course you can also now you become more of an asset to communicate to the other people of the crew,
Right.
almost translate. Funny enough, you know.
Yep.
Um, yeah, no, I definitely can see that. And plus, I think people can always relate to musicians and like when people, that's always a connecting point. I feel with people, it's like, oh, you play music.
Yeah, art isn't it's not a contained box. You're
Yeah,
never going to work on something and then just like, "Oh, that's it." Just going to keep it in this little hole and just that's it. It doesn't affect anything. No, of course not. Like painters are seeing the things that they want to paint in real life, or just abstractions of what they're going to paint in real life. And you know as a songwriter, I'm walking down the street in work, I'm coming up with little, like, the amount of times that I've written a single lyric just from something that either happened or I saw at work. Just I type it in the notes app and just keep moving on, right? So it works in the opposite way too, right? So
yeah,
you know the filmmaking is influenced by the people who are around them. And if these people that are around them, not just me, but the artists on set, or just the talent, the models, all these people that are artistic people inherently, it's going to color the discussion in a certain way. And that's kind of why I like New York, is just operating and living and working in New York. Is there's so many creative people, and working on set. As I said, I did a job with 80 extras. Like, all of these people are creative people in some way.
yeah,
Even if the only thing they do is modeling, they're still modeling in for a music video, right? So there's constantly creativity. Sometimes you can get run into trouble because then everybody has an artistic thing to say and everybody has a creative thing to
yeah,
push. But it's positive because, again, most people are trying to make something that's cool at the end of the day.
yeah. There's that undertow commonality just flowing, and it's a synergy because everyone's, it's like, hey, we're all in here because from one level or another, there's a level of like a creative person who wants to try
Mhm.
to make a living out of that, to a certain degree or another. Um, is there is there any particular project? I know you've had amazing opportunities to work with a ton of brands and artists this year. Is there any particular project from this year that you're particularly were were very excited to be a part of or are very excited to be a part of currently?
Yeah, totally. There's so much stuff. I do a lot of really fun projects. I meet a lot of really interesting people. Um, it's kind of cheating because it was December 2022, but that is still technically within the last 12 months.
I'll give
But
it to you.
yeah, we'll take it, right? One of the things I'm most excited to finally share with people when it's done. I did a fan project turned into feature film, basically called it's called Stalker. Um, the subtitle is Shadow of the Zone. It was a crowdfunded project that kind of became this big film project. It was pitched to me as a short, but as per our um, as per our production members, I won't say more than this, but it's not short. Um, and reading the script, when I read
I've
the
been
script the
there.
first time, I was like, "This is not a short film," and it's excellent. I'm glad we did it. But we basically the project ended up being, we went down to South Carolina for 3.5 weeks, and we shot a movie. We shot a movie in South Carolina, one location on an abandoned nuclear facility, which was kind of an interesting location to be on. We lived on the campus.
I didn't even know
There
there
was
was one in
nothing.
South Carolina.
Uh,
Nuclear
it, it
facility.
it's basically become like a government training facility. They
Okay.
use it for like tactical things, and
When you say
they
nuclear, you mean like a power plant or do you mean like
yeah, like
testing?
they it
Okay.
was it was shut down, I think, in the 70s or the 80s or something like that. But it's a wild location with a lot of really cool looks for the property and for the film that we were going for. Um, but yeah, it was a military sci-fi film, and we just lived that film. We lived it. So again, we lived on the campus. There was nothing around. We were almost completely isolated with the whole crew there, and it was stressful as hell. I got COVID on the job, and we kept working through it because we had to, and we had no other option. And it was a lot of fun. It was really cool. We did some stuff that we shouldn't have been able to pull off given our crew size and our budget
Yeah.
and all that stuff, and the time we shot in. It was 3 weeks we were there basically total, and we did not have a lot of leniency on that, and it was we got through it. And it was I'm trying to avoid like some of
Yeah,
the more
yeah.
specific details, but the
Okay.
project should be out semi soon from what I'm being told. And I have not seen a single thing basically from it. I've seen a frame or two, and all of the cast is so great. They're always posting BTS photos, but it's the thing I'm like most excited to see that I've worked on. It's like one of the features that I've done that feels like, wow, this was like an effort, but we got it. Like we locked that in.
That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'm already sold. Military sci-fi right up my alley.
Done.
But oh, that's so cool. You know, it's always funny to me how asking this question, like most of the time it's that project that was like crowdfunded, you know, everyone got together. It's not the biggest or craziest crew, but it's like, yeah, we just did this in 3 days, or we did this in like really like
Yep.
crazy circumstances, and you guys just put everything you had on the field, and it makes the most exciting projects. And sometimes
Totally.
you surprise yourself when you're under that kind of pressure. And then I'm sure getting sick on the job and everything, but you guys were already stuck together, so you might
Yeah.
as well keep. Since you guys were all isolated, you were basically quarantining anyways.
Yeah,
Oh,
essentially, yeah. We were down in it. A couple of the key crew members got COVID, and it was a little bit tough. But we were in the woods for like the majority of what we were doing, so we just stayed back. I called it from safe COVID safe distance away. Yeah, basically. And I don't use a megaphone. That's like one of my big things. I try
oh,
not to use a
really?
megaphone basically ever. Yeah, I that's a huge stigma for me. Like I
Okay,
think unless it's absolutely necessary, I try not to use it because I think that if you're trying to command attention, people should actually listen to you and not hear like a bullhorn or whatever.
I got you.
It's a personal thing, but I
Respect.
like not using it so that way people can kind of like hear me and they're
Mm.
looking for the person actually talking.
That's respectful. Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. It's like it reminds me of when teachers are like, you know, they refuse to speak up. So it's like, well, I'll wait till you guys are at a talking volume for me to continue class.
Yeah.
um, but no, it's a smart psychological thing. I dig that. What was the what would you say is probably the and so when does that release, by the way? Do you know?
It was. I was told a premiere date, and then it did not happen. So
Okay.
we're waiting. We're waiting, standing by for it. I'm very excited for it, which is why it still falls within these
Okay.
12 months because it's not out yet.
Where can people keep track of it? Just so in case anyone's
That's a
wondering.
good question. I believe if you just go, if you find Stalker Shadow of the Zone, all the updates should be.
Perfect.
I think they mostly do Kickstarter updates and stuff if they have to.
Perfect. Okay,
Um,
awesome. What would you say is probably the biggest crew you've ever had to work with?
oh boy. Biggest crew size. Probably. I think the biggest I've had like under me as a
Yeah.
first is like a 70, 75 person
Okay.
crew, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Um, it I haven't gotten to the triple digits yet. That's really like the union level stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any project I've ever been on that really requires that many people. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I mean,
I've done stuff.
75 is still a pretty big
It's a
number
lot.
to think about
Um,
for a like was that for like a commercial or for
2 day shoot. Yeah.
it was a
Um,
2-day commercial shoot?
A lot of G&E. That's really why. Like you start to balloon the numbers when you have 15 members of G&E on the shoot, and then you start breaking it down. You have 20 PAs, or it's
Wow.
like you start to get crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. 20 PAs. But I
Got to
mean,
get those lockups.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's a crazy number. So, and, but commonly, what would you say is like the average crew size for most of these?
For non-union productions that I work mostly in and around, I'd say the average crew size is anywhere from like 35 to 45, somewhere in that range. Like
Makes
that's
sense.
kind of common. I do, I'll take jobs that are 8 to 12 people, and we're just kind of running around the city. I get a lot of those, especially with New York. People just want to see the city, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
just want to go through Brooklyn and Manhattan, just kind of see as many of the skylines and the cool iconic things as possible. So I'll get a lot of the shoots where it's just like, hey, we just want to see, if it's a commercial, the product and this, or if it's a music video, the artist in this space and just living in New York. Like I do a lot of that stuff. But the stuff that's not that, or maybe a little bit more in studio or bigger setups or more elaborate things, yeah, it's typically around 35 to 45. But it scales.
It
It depends on
scales.
what the
Yeah.
production needs.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah. Okay. No, awesome. Yeah, with that, I mean, like, so as a first AD, so you're trying to obviously, I guess, as the crew scales up, your prep time scales up. I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, you gotta Batman this stuff a lot.
yeah. Um,
um,
yeah, prep time is an interesting game, because I try to get as much of it as I can. I try to
mm-hmm,
plan for as much of it as I can. I do get a lot of my work within a week or two of the job that happens. So I don't typically get a lot of
mm-hmm.
a ton of lead. When I've done features, those are always like the things that have the most prep time.
Yeah, because
It's
those have to
usually why
have the
I
scripts already laid out, and
yeah,
they do a ton of pre-pro for those things. But
100%. And that's why I like doing features, basically more than anything, because I can give myself the time to kind of like sit down and go through it all. Besides the fact that structurally, for planning out a feature is kind of one of the things I like most about the job. Just kind of being able to shuffle things around and
makes
problem
sense.
solve in that way. But in terms of other prep time, it's really an interesting game, um, because prep days can land on scout days for other jobs, or hey, this
Mm,
client is only going to be in town the day before this job, and now
yeah,
we got to scout like literally 12 hours before this job happens, but oh wait, I am still shooting on something else, and so we have to figure it out. I've recently, especially this year, have run into that a lot.
mm,
And it's been an interesting challenge to kind of
problem
double.
solve.
Yeah, sometimes I know other EDs will like have a second, and they'll put their second on the scout, so that way they can relay the information back to the first.
Yeah,
I've been the scout person to be the second on the actual day of the job. I've done every version of it. It's really just about what does the job actually require, and how much can you possibly get out of it. I just try to talk to the producer and the director as soon as I possibly can with everything, and just kind of again ask all those questions that I possibly
yeah,
can first, before we even talk about being there on location or doing anything like that. And then when we get to location scout, it's like, okay, so we know what we're talking about. Now let's kind of like put it all in context, basically.
yeah.
Um,
Here's
but it's always a battle to get as much prep time as I can for some of these productions.
oh, 100%. I mean, actually, something that would even help me as someone who is constantly, dealing with multiple departments, and a lot of the heads of these departments, like your director, your DP, the lead electric, the lead gaffer, all these guys, right? Sound. Because everyone and the actors and stuff like that, and the casting director and those people who are supervising. Um, what is it? What are maybe some of the things you kind of wish they would already have on lock that would make your life easier? Like, I'm sure that there's multiple times that you have to like almost make sure you're on top of from certain people to
Yeah.
be like, because you know it's going to interfere with what you're doing. And I feel like, because sometimes I get this feeling, we usually do smaller crews, so sometimes we're doing our own directing and DPing simultaneously, and I know sometimes it's like, I with some of my regular season guys, they kind of already know how I like certain things and different things like that. So it's like they're already kind of on top of certain details. But you're popping in, of course, with different people a lot of the time,
Right.
and so it's like, if there things that you feel like, you know, will make the day go smoother if the DP or the camera ops already had this on lock ahead of time, or the director kind of had this, or the script supervisor or whatever. Um, what do you feel like some of those things as like, you know, that this would be helpful. You know, make
Yeah.
everybody like, if you want to be a DP that every AD comes in contact and loves you because you're like, oh, I already got on lock. Like, what are those things, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I have a couple, and none of them, all of them are in good faith.
Of
Number
course, of
one is
course.
always, number one is always read the call sheet. You'd be surprised at how many people don't read the call sheet enough to know like what stuff I've specifically put in there, so that way like it answers questions that people might have had
Like
before.
the
And I get
whole
it.
call sheet.
Yeah, read usually the call sheet that I put out. If I'm doing this call sheet, there's a schedule on it, or at least like a reduced schedule. So at least we have the order of events, locations, and stuff. So all the easy basic questions are out of the way, right? Um, and then kind of supplementally, like the shot list and the schedule, like read the schedule that I have hopefully spent a ton of time putting out and creating. And then the shot list is not from me, but the anybody who works with me knows I have to bully the shot lists from them. Um, from the lowest to the biggest productions, I've had trouble getting a shot list in my hands accurately to the time of production. So that's like my number one thing. Like, I just need, all I want to know is what you want to shoot. I'll make it happen. No matter what you give me, I will try to make it happen. But I need to know what your expectation of the day is, because if you give me a shot list that has 80 shots and it's a 1 day shoot, it's not going to happen. Or at least it's going to be, we're going to have to move either very quickly, or we're going to have to shoot it in a way that is a little bit more flexible than maybe you were anticipating, right? Like, it's a third of my repertoire of how to approach a job is that shot list. Um, my only other, like, I guess not only, but I guess one of the other things I could say to most departments is just people giving me accurate times, right? Knowing your job enough to know how much time to give me. The another big AED stereotype is just like walking up to the G&E guys standing on a ladder and saying like 15 minutes and then walking away, and it's like, well, that didn't help anybody. Like, that didn't help you because you're looking bad in front of them. You didn't ask them how long they needed, right? So, and if it just doesn't work. So for me, it's like asking the keys, like the keys of every department, hey, how much time do you need? And obviously, if it changes or fluctuates, that's fine. It happens all the time, and things change and whatever. But if X department tells me, hey, 10 minutes, and then I come back in 10 minutes, and then they're like, oh, actually 30. It's like, well, that was a bad estimate. Like, what happened between the last 10 minutes that changed it to triple the time that you told me? Um, so just knowing your department and your job enough just to communicate accurate with me. I'll be cool with you no matter what you tell me. I just want to know the number so that way I can kind of like build the rest of the day, because I can shuffle things around, right? If we have a blood wound coming from all the way down your arm all the way here, and I estimated that for an hour, and we talked about it to be an hour, and then we get there on the day and we realize, oh wait, the skin isn't gonna, like, it's not gluing correctly. I've had this happen exactly before. It's actually gonna be like a 2.5 hour move. Great, cool. I want to make this happen. I want this to look dope when we get it in camera. What else can we shoot? What else can we rotate the date around to get this thing here? I'm not gonna wait 2.5 hours for big blood gash as long as I don't have to. Um, so it's accurate times are like a killer on set if I don't get those as often as I can. Um, but it works both ways. Like, I have to communicate that with the crew. Like, hey, I really need. This is my time parameter. This is what I'm looking to get done with before lunch or within this period of the day. Can this happen? And if the answer is no, we have to redirect. And ideally, most of this happens before we're even there on before the shoot day or shoot days. Um, but if we get to the day and we realize it's really not possible, how do we adjust? What can we do? Um, yeah, and that just talks with the director, the producers, and everybody around.
No, I think, I mean, I think all those are really great points. I think it really comes down to, again, effective communication, but in the sense that, like, you're putting things out there to smooth the day out as far as the schedule, call sheet, different things like that. So, of course, if people are coming back to you with questions that were answered previously already in those sheets, you know, it slows everything down because then you're trying to reiterate something that you've already have the document for, you know,
Yeah,
and they're now like, why aren't they in position? Oh, they didn't know they had to be. It's like, because it's on the schedule, but they didn't look that far because they thought they're only in this position. So they saw their name, it's here, that's it. And that's all they saw.
yeah,
But of course, it doesn't work like that. I feel like, so I think that's definitely, as a crew member in general, if you're just fully aware of what the day is supposed to look like, then you look like a valuable asset on any crew, I think. If you're already on top of, like, oh yeah, I know the whole schedule. I know you're where everybody else is supposed to be too. It's like, um, the shot list thing is an that was it's an interesting point. But I can definitely see that that is 100% like your a lot of your decisions are dependent on that. So
yeah,
definitely being on top of that and knowing your job well enough to give realistic times. And also, I think that also plays into, I think people tend to try to underestimate and over deliver because they want you to not look at them badly, and they
right.
like it if good, they like it, they get that self-consciousness. It's like, oh, I'm not the bad actor here. So but what really happens is when you can't deliver on the time you say, then you become the bad actor without, when you're trying to avoid it. But it's even better if you say it's going to take me an hour, but it took you 45 minutes, and it's like, great, we're
Yeah,
15 minutes ahead
great.
of
We'll
time.
take it.
Like,
Right.
but you're trying to just problem solve. You're not like trying to attack anyone. It's just like, I just need to
No.
know so I can, like you said, we can shift this whole thing over. It's like, oh, I can get, okay, now I know if I have to wait an extra hour, it's like, well, I have enough time actually to do this now. So we're going to go do this. You take the time you need, finish that, because we're a team. We're trying to work together and make this thing happen as best as possible. And I'm not trying to hinder your job. So, but of course, you can't do that effectively if you're getting ineffective times for
Yeah.
sure. So,
The
makes a
yeah,
ton of sense.
I say it to everybody all the time, like, we're here to make art, and I just want to get you to see the family or eat dinner at home tonight. It's like it's very easy, but it's just like the general structure of the day only works if we can do that. And there's a big asterisk on everything I just said. And the only
Of
thing is,
course.
like, people who work with me multiple times know the drill,
Yeah.
and they get the vibe quickly. Like, if I'm walking up to them, they know what they answer. They know what question I'm about to ask them, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. It's like what I was saying
big
with
shout
the
out to
season
everybody
guys.
who yeah, big shout out to my frequent flyers, all my regular crew, that everybody knows who you are. Respect everybody.
Awesome. Awesome. So, what do you feel? What does the future look like for you? What is the direction you're trying to head in ultimately?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's one I ask myself daily. I see myself ADing for a long time. I like the job a lot, and I would love to do bigger and bigger projects. Like, I would love to eventually be an AD on, like, an action movie. Some of the stuff I've gotten tastes of it. I've done fight choreography. I've done car stuff. I've done some stuff in my role, and I've been very thankful to. Um, but I want to do bigger and bigger stuff, and I'd love to get to the level where I'm doing some crazy blockbuster film. That'd be just cool to do at least once, right? But I also it's a very stressful job, and my partner it doubles me on some of the stuff where she's concerned about this statistic, but it's an unfortunate statistic that, like, ADs don't have a huge life expectancy. It's a terrible stat, but it's it's a very stressful job, and it gets to you. And I feel it now at my age, which is relatively young. And I know that I don't want to just burn myself out for, 30, 40 years just doing this like nonstop. Especially because I've already been doing it basically right this, even before I finished school, I was doing production work. So I don't want to just go full, full ramp all the time. Um, One of the goals I would have for myself is like direct a little bit, write and direct doing my own things. Um, it was subbing out between ADing. So like when I'm not actually in progress shooting something of my own, I'm ADing. And then when I can, or when I have the next project ready to go and I'm like, yeah, I feel good about this, taking some time and doing some directing or some music or whatever feels natural to me. But just being able to still feel like I have that creative outlet, like I always have that creative center, because again, ADing is so, it can be creative, but it's not as a
Mm-hmm.
job. You're not looking at it like, you're not being asked as an AD to input creativity. You're going to be there. You're probably going to give creative solutions to problems. Um, but it just comes with the territory. I'm sorry. Um, so yeah, I always want to make sure that there is that alternate for me at some point, just to flip off, just be like, hey, you know what? I just got off of a 6-month feature. I'm going to go and write for 2 months just to do something, just to kind of be in a separate space.
I
And
love that.
that to me feels comfortable, for me in my future. As of now, I don't know, life
Yeah,
and family might change that, and,
never know.
then we get a whole different situation.
Yeah, absolutely love that. I mean, I feel very similarly, just like always maintaining that creative outlet, because, when work is still work, even if you're on the creative side, when you're
Yep.
doing it for somebody else, it's their creative, it's not your creative, essentially. But it's still, um, it's just maintaining that for yourself. I think it's an important part of a holistic life. So I love that. And definitely, of course, like, exploring other avenues, like you said, taking it step by step. Um, yeah, no, with all that, I do want to thank you for coming on today. I think we had, I could be asking you like a million more questions, honestly. There's so many great
You
projects and
ask
stuff
whatever
like
you
that.
want. I know you have your time too, but you can ask me whatever you'd like.
No, I appreciate that. But that is the time we do have for today. So I appreciate you coming on. Can you please, real quick, just let everybody know where they can find you, where they can pursue your creative efforts, and just keep track with what's going on with Nick?
Sure. So you can find me on most platforms, but generally my central platform is Instagram. Um, it's just my name, but it's a little long. It's N Sasi Romano, so NSOSSI ROMANO. That's kind of like my portfolio, like work hub. It also has my Vimeo link in there if you want to see any of the directing stuff that I've worked on in the past. Um, and I'm, as I said before, I'm in a band, and you can find us at Slumber Music, SLMBR Music, and find us on Spotify and whatever else at Slumber. Yeah, we play shows all the time in New York too, so that's fun when we mix some video stuff and whatever. And yeah, if you are a New York production member or not, if you are in anywhere and are in need of an AD, I would be more than happy to talk to you about your next project.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. As always, you can always find us at Vision Maker, Vision Maker Podcast and our other creative endeavors at Vision Maker Productions. Thank you so much, and have a great night, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Good night.